One thing that comes to mind for me also is pay attention to your body. Notice how you feel when you're in different environments. Notice what you're naturally drawn to, what your interests are. Our bodies are really good indicators of like, this is great or no, thank you. So I just invite you to also stay with yourself. It's easy to get wrapped up into what we should or all these different things that come along our path. But if you can, just notice your body, pay attention to what it's telling you in the different spaces that you get to be in during your training. That also might be a good indication of where you feel best.
And maybe you can pilot test that during your PhD journey. For example, let's say you are a GA and you got one opportunity to speak in the class, and maybe your advisor said, "Hey, please go and teach one lecture on my behalf." And then you truly enjoyed that lecture when you were interacting with the students, and that is a trigger point for you. And maybe if you enjoyed it, as Dr. Weissman said, that notice like what your body is telling you. If you feel happy and because you were able to help other students, then possibly you will accumulate those experiences in your trajectory to be a good mentor or teacher. So maybe teaching will be your primary path, which leads to PhD, because in order to be assistant professor, associate professor, those kind of trajectory, you will need your PhD. So just find that trigger point and that starting point and use your PhD for your piloting, like your pilot intervention that you are going to do in the PhD.
I would follow up on that very quickly of if sometimes faculty don't know what you want, and so it's okay for you to ask for what you want. And so like a faculty member might not offer you to take a lecture, but if you want that experience, it's okay to ask for it.
I will also say one more thing. Sorry, but that's so important. Coming back to what Amanda said, I think it's always advisable to have regular touch base with your advisor and say what you need. Okay. Just monitor your progress, where you want to go, what you are doing currently, and just discuss those things openly, like what you want. So I think that's a really good point.
Thank you. What kinds of PhD students' misconceptions may there be with concerning faculty roles in relation to non-academic roles?
Maybe teaching load. Students might perceive like, okay, faculty members, they have to do a lot of things. They have to teach at least 4 classes in a semester, doing a lot of research, do a lot of grant application. So that kind of like workload maybe is kind of thing, but they they might perceive that maybe going into non-academia will be better than being in academia. But on the other hand, when you work in academic world, you get more resources in terms of if you really want to pursue your research in terms of library like databases, you want like some professional development opportunities like institutional wide, you get some travel kind of like going to the conference and having better networking events rather than sitting in the office. So maybe those are the two things, on two fronts, which will maybe have some sort of decision making factors.
I think one misconception that I had when I was especially an early PhD student was that the faculty was the only way to go. I think that there are some faculty that have that kind of like project that onto students that like going academia is the only route if you're getting your PhD. And so I think that's why, like I said before, is like having diverse set of people to talk to know like what can you do in a faculty role, and like it's not just the teaching and the research, like kind of getting those like dated, like I think I didn't know when I was a graduate student of like going to faculty meetings and going to college meetings and all these kind of other things that were part of like that I didn't know what faculty did.
And plus, they have to, once they are doing PhD, they have to keep in the view their previous qualification also. They don't have to go by PhD only. So if I'm PhD in public health, I can be only fit in PhD in public health. No, meaning just look for your previous degrees, like, you see like how you can integrate that knowledge with other fields And then, for example, me, I was hired in School of Medicine, but I have PhD in public health, right? But because I was able to integrate these two fields, because I'm dental surgeon, so I understand the medical terminology, and then I was a statistician, so I was kind of like integrate these two pieces. So when you think about those things, just think about where you can fit, just to reduce those misconceptions. Like sometimes your circle of having those possibility just shrinks when you just think about only terminal degree rather than thinking about other qualifications that you had. Take the example of Dr. Weissman. She was having diverse experience and how she integrated that well in her current position. So that's another example.
Thank you. What skills are most transferable from a PhD program to non-academic roles? And how can students gain relevant experience while still in their PhD programs, regardless of the path that they choose?
I think that one of the most valuable thing for me is understanding research, being able to read and interpret research in both fields. I'm a qualitative researcher, but having had the background in taking statistics, and I feel like that has been one of the most transferable and useful skills of having a PhD. The other would be how to design research. But I think the most important thing is really in our humanity, how we show up with our expertise, but also with our kindness and with our empathy. I think we have a really unique opportunity with the training that we have to kind of cross-pollinate with other people, other fields, and bring those ideas in and create new learning.
That is so much Weissman brand, right? Dr. Weissman. I really like that. One thing I will say that if no matter where you are right now, whether you are in academia or non-academia, if you can ask 3 or 4 questions in any word like what, who, why, and when, I think you are able to translate. So for example, if you are in the non-academia, if you have that curiosity, like what this issue is, why this is happening, who is getting that experience, who are the people getting it. So if you are able to answer those questions and at least ask those questions from yourself, I think you can translate anything between or connect anything between academia and non-academia. And when you are in a PhD, you do research and you start with those questions. What is a phenomena? Why certain community is experiencing that? What are the different determinants of that outcome in that community? So you ask those questions when you develop any sort of program or project. So if you have that mindset, definitely this mindset will be applicable to any setting wherever you go. So I think that's the main thing.
Going to go a little bit different, only because of my job and what I think about, especially people who are getting a PhD. It's not necessarily like I think about more about when it said like skills. Getting a PhD actually demonstrates a lot of things that people don't realize. It demonstrates a work ethic. I wrote this down, that's why I'm reading it. So it demonstrates work ethic. It demonstrates an ability to prioritize things. It demonstrates the fact that you can complete something very large. It demonstrates an ability to get feedback, receive feedback, and it also demonstrates relationship building. And going through the PhD process, you are given skills that not of like it really does translate not only academically but beyond this, and this is just related to my job because of what I do in terms of giving students language about what they're learning. A PhD is all of those things. It's also a really big project that you manage, organize, and you are in charge of, and you deliver, and you have to talk about it. You have to be an expert. You have to answer questions. And those are skills. That's communication skills, that's writing skills, that's research skills, that's synthesizing, analyzing, all of that stuff. And I think we sometimes lose track of just how competent we are in the field because we just take for granted everybody else on here is a PhD, right? Like we're all like that's not everybody. And so to the point of being aware of you've done something that is meaningful, and I think that matters. And so it's kind of easy to lose that when we were in higher ed and academia. And I think it was somebody made a comment about which PhD you get, getting one matters, but you can do it and you can then apply it in a variety of places.
Yeah, I think the two things that I find most valuable, one is just critical thinking skills. Being a PhD, like having doing PhD classes makes you think about things critically and like in different ways. It doesn't, you're learning to kind of challenge the status quo. You're learning to like change the way that we look at things. And so I think that that skill is not something that everybody has. And so you're learning a very important critical thinking skill. And then I'm, like I said, I'm a quantitative person. I think there's a lot more jobs opening in like data science and think people are using their data in a different way. And so I think those technical data skills are really important if you are interested in and like doing statistics. There's a lot of room for like data science and like taking numbers and making meaning out of them. And so I think those are the two big things that I've taken.
And problem solving things, the capability of finding problem solutions, I think enhanced during your PhD, because PhD is not difficult in itself. No, it is difficult like to learn about how to navigate all those elements aside from the course elements. Like, for example, your advisor got changed because that person left the institution. Now you have to look for other advisor. Those are things like really, and then you have to wear your hat on with the problem solution mindset and see like who's other person who might be able to serve on your committee, or your timeline got delayed for some reason. So those things, I think problem solution mindset, your capability enhanced during PhD, which is applicable anywhere in the world. Like you have to be problem solver in the professional world.
How can students investigate non-academic career paths in a way that doesn't make them feel as if they're leaving or devaluing their education?
I'll always go first. I literally wrote that 2026 is a brave new world. I think that you're not obliged in this current climate to do that. I think Amanda made a really good point. You're allowed to ask for things, and I think students are a lot more pragmatic and realistic about what their job opportunities are and what's available. And we have access to things now where you can look. And I would say that looking beyond academia doesn't devalue your PhD. I think based on the just what we just said, the life skills and the academic skills are all in one. And so I don't think um I personally think that we're in 2026 and a PhD, it's about yours. It's about what you choose in terms of how you want to apply it. I think a lot of the other panelists kind of spoke better to this part where, what are you getting out of this experience and what are you making out of this? So I personally don't know. I understand the feeling because of historically, but I think we're in a different time and students are different.
One example is that in certain companies like Qualtrics Market Research or Amazon, they have their own department of research where they want to utilize like customer satisfaction, doing some sort of like surveys, and they always look for PhDs in that. So I don't think so there is like any sort of devalue there. Really, you can utilize your PhD there and be in the like up position where you are leading those efforts and using your or translating your doctoral knowledge to that level. So I think you have to find your way, and there is no easy way to find your way, meaning your interests are going to be, there will be a evolution of interest during your PhD, and suddenly you will get to that point where you will say, oh, okay, this is what I really love doing, and this is giving me good work life balance, or this is giving me a good designation in the company, and it is giving me opportunity to use my PhD skills. Why not?
One of the things I think about by using your education, your experience in the private sector that's so rad is like we hear a lot about like the silos or like how in higher education, like we stay more within. And something that I think is really neat is when we bring our work and our expertise out into the private sector, that also we have the opportunity there to teach and to elevate. I know a lot of the therapists I worked with at, when I worked at Caesar's Palace while I was doing my master's or my PhD, many of them went on to continue their education. And so I think it's also sharing and talking about what interests you and like just sharing what you're passionate about. And I think wherever you end up doing it, you'll know as you listen to your body what makes sense to you.
And people will value that. So let's say if you are translating those skills like PhD skills in the non-academia, they will value that perspective. When I was working with the State Department, they have a lot of data and they don't convert those data into scholarly outcomes. So when I was working with them, I asked them to create some sort of program where they can utilize those data sets and pair those with the academia, like academia world. For example, they can partner with anybody from the university and they can do the research, having those equal partnership. So we actually started a program. So, if you bring some different lens there with your PhD, always it is appreciated in the work environment.
Yeah, and I was going to touch on the devaluing part. Like sometimes they will value you, they will compensate you or like give you like your PhD could get you more outside of academia sometimes, but it's not devaluing, it's actually sometimes adding value to your life by having a PhD and not going into academia. So there are other ways of valuing your knowledge, not necessarily just from like publications and conferences, but there are other ways that they will compensate you for that knowledge.
And sometimes employers even give you money for doing your PhD, meaning if you were hired in the company at a master level and you are doing really well, they will support you a tuition fee to pay for the PhD. So that means another indicator that they value. So I think there will be little room for devaluing extraordinary skills that you gain from PhD in the non-academic world.
In what ways might mentorship and networking help PhD students in exploring multiple career alternatives?
Mentorship has been the best gift and networking. I think for me, it completely brought my career into being. I mean, talk to everyone if you're open to that. Meet people where they are, to share what your interests are. I think that web of connectivity that helps all of us humans will help you get where you need to go. I think it can't be underestimated.
And start early. So it should not be perceived as that you are making connection only for the sake of getting job. No, that has to be a long-term journey when you are already being so, honest in your relationships and you are actually continuously interacting with people. But that should be a, longitudinal view rather than a cross section. So people will know you better. They will be able to speak about you more rather than having just a cross-sectional interactions. So I think just start early, have that viewpoint, be professional. So it's not only like, in your assignments, let's say just one habit, you are getting delayed on submitting the assignment. It's a professional courtesy that you are going to write one email to your advisor, say, due to this reason, I'm delayed in submitting my, assignment. Now, this attitude of letting people know about a delay or something is going to be a positive later down the road because you are being professional to give advance information or notification to the people. So that's like some habits that you acquire, but really it's really make your brand really early. Don't set up your brand late in the game.
I think I've said this before too today, of getting to talking to different people and talking, being honest about what you are interested in and things like that. Even if that specific person can't help you in what you need, they might know somebody who knows somebody, or the world is very tiny once you realize it. And so I think just being honest about what your goals are and what you're interested in, that it might make you can make connections across, not just in your college, but across the colleges at UNLV, and they might connect you to somebody they know from the institution where they got their PhD and things like that. And so just talking to as many people as possible, I think, is really helpful in understanding the different opportunities that are available to you.
And your reputation moves faster than you move. So try to build a good reputation. Don't think that, okay, this is like just my class fellow, what I need from him or her in the next time. So please be respectful and always think about that your ethics, your reputation always travel ahead of you and faster than you. So just keep that in the mind.
Okay. What advice would you give PhD students who feel pressure from advisors, peers, or departments, or even their friends and family to pursue a faculty career, even if they are uncertain?
So I I wrote something. Uh, I wrote confidently disagree with clarity, provide context and acknowledgement about the unique time we exist in terms of the job market and career exploration. Because I think what I've heard, and I think it's been said, is that you know you better. From what Annie has said to Amanda and Kavita, Dr. Boucher, Dr. Hoffman, you know what you're experiencing, you know what you're going through, but also it's not a straight line. And so I think if you're honest with what you're experiencing and honest with what your goals are, I think that's it. I had strong feelings about what I wanted to do with my PhD, and I was told to do a lot of things, and we had spirited discussions about it. But you get to chart your own course, and I really liked what Dr. Batra said about your reputation. If you show up authentically in the beginning and are earnest and eager and want to engage and be thoughtful and respectful and professional, that'll go much farther. And I think you that will translate to those conversations when you're talking to people who might disagree with you. You have some clarity, and I think my wife can talk about this much better about being regulated and in harmony and all of these things in your body. I think it all makes sense. So that's kind of my take.
I will say be open minded. Have a broad view about yourself, about the world that you are interacting with. So I will say, going back to what qualification you had, what previous experiences you had, try to have that and have a holistic view when you shape your trajectory or shape your opinions or shape your next steps. So be open minded, what you can do.
Yeah, I would say I definitely agree with being open-minded. And open-minded but firm, I guess, is where I would land. Is that like the people who are a lot of times the people who are pressuring you just want the best out of, like, they want what they think is best. But it's okay to disagree with people, even your advisor and like other faculty members. Like, just because they have their PhD doesn't mean that they know better than what Ted said about you knowing you best.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the like what you need to do through that 5 years of your or 4 or 5 years of your PhD is figuring out what it is you want to do and then being firm in that.
Yeah, I agree. Just stay with yourself. Notice what's true for you. Speak with what's true for you. People have all kinds of opinions, like we know, but just take it under consideration, but also stick with what's true for you. You'll know.
Well, thank you all for your insight today. I didn't get any questions, so we can hang on for a few more minutes. But before we conclude today's session, I would like to sincerely thank our panelists for sharing their time, their insight, and their experience with us. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's workshop. Prior to logging off, it was already dropped into the chat. If you guys could take a few minutes to fill out our workshop feedback survey, it really helps us with our programming efforts. And yes, we do read them. So please fill out the survey. But thank you again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.